Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am your host, Sandy Schoelles, and I think we've got a pretty good show tonight. It's good to see all of you, Looney Tunes and Tommyist and Kim. Thank you for moderating, and Scott and Trulia, and hi, Kristen. Hi, Jean. Okay, so let me get started. I have an article, but I decided I wasn't going to just sit here and read it and be boring. So I made a video, and it's a Richard Heinberg article. And what I want to do is just talk a little bit about Richard and who he is. So let me screen share and get this up. And I'm going to show you. I'm sure a lot of you know who he is, but he's from the Post Carbon Institute, and this is the article that I have done. You may think you're immune to cult thinking, but we're all susceptible. So who is Richard? Post Carbon Institute, and he is quite the guy. I do believe that he has been interviewed by Sam over on Collapse Chronicles. I don't know. I didn't have time to look for that. But and hello, Kameshwari Kate. It's just great to see all of you. So Richard, he's a senior fellow at the Post Carbon Institute, and he is this one says regarded as one of the world's foremost advocates for a shift away from our current reliance on fossil fuels. And hello, Connor. It's nice to see you here. And Vegematic. Okay, so he's written a shit boatload of stuff. And he also has, I'm not going to go through it, but I mean, he writes for magazines. He's delivered hundreds of lectures on energy and climate issues. And actually tonight is not just climate or ecological. His latest article is quite interesting, and it captivates me because I'm very interested in that topic, of cults. I mean, guys, we have been called a cult, the doomer cult. I've been called a cultist, by, I think it was somebody named Sat 12, I think it was, 1, 2. Anyway, that we are cultists, and we are not doomsday necessarily, but being doomsters, doomers, whatever, that we see we're in a cult, which, of course, I don't feel like we're in a cult. No. But Richard, his writings, this is his website, his own. So he's got the Post Carbon Institute, and then he's got his own. Here's all his writings. I'll have the links up. And Polycrisis, Unraveling, Simplification, or Collapse. That might be the last one that Sam read. But, I made a movie. So we are going to watch that. Are you ready? Is everybody here? Is everybody ready? I would like to get it started because I want to watch it with you. It is the article. And, what do you think? Are you all here? I see Retro Boomer, and why is it still too damn hot? Looney Tunes. Oh my gosh. Well, it wasn't here, actually. It really wasn't. Today was a cold, not cold, but it was like September, and it was rainy and windy and gross, and it actually knocked down a couple of my flowers, and I had to move things around. So it was kind of an icky day today, actually. All right, so let's get ready. We're going to watch this together. So really pay attention. Really pay attention. I didn't get to do the last edit, so there might be a couple of audio glitches, but you know what? Who cares? It's better than just me going, oh, I'm reading the article. So here we go. You may think you're immune to cult thinking, but we're all susceptible. By Richard Heinberg, August 7th, 2023. Times of societal upheaval or rapid social change tend to generate new religious movements and what are often called cults. The English Civil War in the 17th century roughly coincided with the emergence of Puritanism, with its sub-denominations including the Pilgrims. Similarly, the U.S. Revolutionary War and national independence kicked off the Second Great Awakening, 1790s to 1840s, with the rise of an evangelical Protestant majority in antebellum America, along with new denominations and social reform organizations. The U.S. Civil War coincided approximately with the founding of the Southern Baptist Convention, the rise of Mormonism, and the first appearance of Buddhist temples in the country. The 20th century, with its rapid industrialization and two world wars, saw a bewildering variety of new religious movements burst upon the scene, ranging from Assemblies of God to Transcendental Meditation, the Unification Church, and Scientology. As documented in Post-Carbon Institute's recent report, quote, "Welcome to the Great Unraveling," unquote, humanity is on the cusp of unprecedented social and ecological turmoil. Climate change, resource depletion, and failing ecosystems will likely lead to disruptions in the availability of food and water. Supply chains will be imperiled and economies will shrink. Human migration will increase. Historically high levels of economic inequality will fuel more political polarization. Faced with so many deepening challenges, people will demand explanations and answers. With the existing authorities fixated on maintaining the status quo and therefore unable to offer sufficient relief, many people will look elsewhere for new ways of understanding and responding to burgeoning problems. For the past few decades, the United States has been overproducing elites and elite aspirants, billionaires, holders of law degrees. As Peter Turchin and his colleagues have shown, throughout history, people with frustrated elite aspirations sometimes become religious, political, or ideological entrepreneurs, drawing followers from the increasingly disgruntled general populace. These anti-establishment leaders may seek authoritarian power by providing their followers with a sense of having special knowledge and of being members of a vanguard of chosen ones who will return society to a lost golden age of virtue and plenty. If we are likely to see a surge in religious and secular cults in the years ahead, it's worth spending a few minutes to consider. What should we watch out for in order to avoid being swept up in cultic thinking? What can we learn from history and sociology about what Turchin calls, quote, end times, unquote? And is cultic thinking the only alternative to dysfunctional mainstream institutions and worldviews? What is a cult? The words cult, culture, and cultivate all derive from the Latin word cultus, which refers to anything over which we toil. For scholars of early religions, a cult is a human activity that involves ritual and ceremony, which cultivate the human spirit and sense of community. However, the modern world, cult, has come to mean something more specific. Joel Kramer and Diana Alstead, in their useful book, The Guru Papers, Masks of Authoritarian Power in 1993, define cults as groups with an authoritarian structure where the leader's power is not constrained by scripture, tradition, or any other higher authority. I have some personal experience to draw upon in this regard. From 1978 to 1991, I was a member of a spiritual organization that I'd prefer not to name. You've probably never heard of it anyway. It operated 12 intentional communities and dozens of communal households scattered through the U.S., Canada, England, France. These featured organic farms and geodesic domes. Bright, idealistic people, young, idealistic people, they were attracted by the promise of changing the world by changing consciousness. We were living a, quote, whole earth catalog, unquote, lifestyle, but with added layers of quirky spirituality and top-down management. It wasn't one of the most toxic of cults. People who chose to leave weren't hounded or persecuted. Nonetheless, one man stood atop the pyramid of power. Other subordinate male leaders had great privileges, and everyone was expected to regard the main leader's weekly pronouncements as a revealed truth. We believed that we had special knowledge that set us apart from the rest of humanity. And as in the case in most cults, we were repeatedly told, "This is not a cult." My cult experience was not without its rewards. Though I met my future wife through this, as well as many good friends I still stay in touch with. I had a satisfactory sense of being part of a group that had visionary goals, and the group's leaders nurtured my aspirations for writing and public speaking. The main subjects I was researching and writing about in those days were world mythology and world religions. I began by looking at these subjects through the lens of the cult's teachings. But after a couple of years of doing this, I began to realize that where our cult's beliefs were unassailably true and valuable, they weren't particularly original. They roughly corresponded with what Aldous Huxley called perennial philosophy. However, where our cult's beliefs were clearly original, example, in claiming that our leader was a reincarnation of a prominent biblical figure, they were often of questionable validity or usefulness. I was also growing weary of the group's authoritarian structure and practices. And so, in January of 1992, my partner Janet and I packed up what little we owned and left. Ever since then, I've been hyper aware of cults and cult think. The cult spectrum and conspiracy dynamic. While actual cults, in the sense that Alstead and Kramer defined them, are relatively rare, cultic thinking is everywhere. The modern world is full of authoritarian institutions, including military, many businesses, and most religions, and some expend considerable effort to control people's perceptions and thoughts. Entire professions are dedicated to the goal of winning a cultic following for commercial brands or political parties. Further, many people, whether due to their upbringing or some still unidentified genetic trait, have a greater tendency than others either to follow leaders unquestionably or to seek unquestioning followers. Some religions operate as cults, especially in their early stages of formation, when founders have immense power. Rodney Stark and William Sims Bainbridge commented in their influential book, The Future of Religion from 1986, quote, "In the beginning, all religions are obscure, tiny, deviant cult movements," unquote. But even after a religion has established checks on the power of its clergy, individual churches or temples can become cultish. At the core of cultic thinking is a social power dynamic between leader and followers. The leader provides an explanation of the world that resists critical examination. Belief in or rejection of this explanation establishes an in-group and out-group. Good and evil are then defined in terms of the interests of the in-group. Followers are encouraged to surrender their critical thinking abilities. Cult leaders typically show narcissistic personality traits, while followers may exhibit low self-esteem or may just be motivated by a desire to belong to something larger than themselves. There's a relationship between cults and what are often called conspiracy theories, and I use the term reluctantly, as many conspiracies throughout history are well documented. Every society has a dominant worldview. In Europe, during the Middle Ages, that worldview was determined by the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church. Today's mainstream worldview is far more complicated, and it's largely shaped by science and commercial interests rather than by a single religion. Because our dominant worldview is constructed and supported by armies of experts, as well as by the former power structures of society, political and economic institutions, it tends to be robust and resilient. But all worldviews have blind spots, and partly because challenges to the dominant view are usually systematically discouraged, more blind spots tend to accumulate over time. Eventually, a big blind spot can no longer be ignored, and either the dominant worldview changes or society fractures as many people abandon the mainstream and seek novel ways of thinking and living. At first, the alternative beliefs that cognitive rebels adopt aren't supported by experts or powerful institutions, so they're not as robust as the dominant narrative, and they always have their own blind spots. Indeed, in some instances, these new beliefs are complete fabrications with no factual validity. So most cults disappear fairly quickly. But some, they manage to create enough social glue so as to persist long after their founder's demise, even if some of their beliefs are highly questionable. Conspiracy theories are not the same as cults, but the two phenomena often coexist. Would-be cult leaders frequently adopt conspiracy theories or invent them so as to have an ideological basis for attracting followers. People who are aware of society's blind spots are often attracted to would-be cult leaders because the former need a new worldview to replace the flawed one they are reacting against, and the latter fill that need. What I'm describing is part of the process of cultural evolution. Conspiracy theories, in the generalized sense of alternative narratives, and cults are products of spontaneous cultural mutation. Gradually, they are winnowed out by natural selection, and the eventual result is a new dominant worldview that may endure for decades or centuries. But times when the dominant narrative is collapsing and a new one hasn't formed yet can be messy and confusing. In the modern world of social media, the process of worldview breakdown and narrative mutation is speeding up and intensifying. Cults galore. Take your pick. The modern dominant worldview's blind spots are highly contested. Name nearly any major area of interest, politics, economics, science, or public health, and it is possible to point to disputes that are deepening to the point where they threaten to divide society into armed camps, often quite literally. One blind spot I've written about extensively is society's acceptance and promotion of economic growth. The expansion of global industry inevitably leads to resource depletion and the destruction of ecosystems, and so it will surely be limited by Earth's bounded capacity to yield minerals, timber, water, and other essential raw materials. Yet mainstream economists remain growthist diehards, and degrowth alternative economic theorists are regarded by the authorities as dangerous cultists. Society's blind spot is so huge and critical that is leading to environmental, social, and political catastrophe. As I happen to agree with the proponents of degrowth, even though the likelihood of their diagnosis and prescription becoming the new mainstream is exceedingly low, at least in the near term. But there are plenty of instances where alternatives to the dominant view are silly or repulsive. Here's an example. For decades, as a result of bipartisan congressional gridlock, the U.S. has failed to implement a reasonable, fair immigration policy. As a result, a large and poorly regulated flow of documented and undocumented migrants is exacerbating political tensions within the country, United States. Because recent migrants' political views tend to align more with one of the country's political parties, the Democrats, that party has sought to win migrants' votes. So the other party, the the Republicans, is toying with great replacement theory as a way to solidify support from native-born Euro-Americans. Great replacement theory starts by pointing out real demographic trends, but tying these trends to a hypothesized secret, malevolent plot to replace white citizens with migrants is pure hokum, a full-on conspiracy theory. Still, it pretends to fill a blind spot and plays to a voter base more cult-like in recent years. And that's not due just to the rise of conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement. During stable times, politics tend to be driven by institutions seeking competent leaders and ways to adapt to a changing economic and geopolitical terrain. But in times of greater stress, politics often center more on personality rather than policy. Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini were leaders whose support flowed largely from personality. Donald Trump is cut from the same cloth, and his rivals for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024 struggle to overcome the personality gap. Just proposing Trump-like policies, it doesn't seem to gain them traction. One of the big features of leadership by personality, not policy, is the tendency to promote big lies. In his book, Mein Kampf, 1925, Hitler described how the public can be induced to believe a colossal falsehood simply because they cannot accept that a leader could have the impudence to distort the truth so infamously. For political personality cultists, the big lie serves the practical purpose of binding followers closer to their leader. Accepting big lies is a badge of membership in a cult. The bigger the lie you accept, the more loyal other cult members perceive you to be, and the more of a sense of belonging you are able to enjoy. Lies, large and small, none bigger or more dangerous than the notion that the 2020 presidential election, which he lost, was stolen by Democrats. In effect, the Trump-dominated Republican Party has become a huge cult, but it would not have done so for giant blind spots in the policies of both the political parties. One other example of dangerous cultic thinking is worthy of brief discussion. As Lewis Mumford, 1895 to 1990, explained at length, the modern world has developed a cult of technology. We look to technology to solve basic human problems that were formerly addressed by family, community, or personal toil. Machines inform us, connect us, transport us, feed us, and entertain us. Not only do consumers love their gizmos, but manufacturers do too, since gadgets produce profits. So do workers and politicians who benefit from jobs created by industrial expansion. Shopping for the latest smartwatch, drone, or mosquito zapper is a sacred ritual of consumerism. And we worship inventors and industrialists like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. Collectively, most of us appear to believe that renewable energy technologies, including electric cars, will save us from climate change. A biblical scale apocalypse that's punishment for our use of fossil-fueled technologies. Like angels soaring to our rescue, new machines will suck surplus carbon out of the atmosphere and safely store it underground. So miraculous are these technologies that we will never have to confront the problems of overpopulation, overconsumption, pollution, and resource depletion because we will have achieved zero carbon emissions. Yes, climate change is a horrific problem, and renewable energy technologies are better than fossil fuel technologies, but the notion that solar panels will enable us to continue consuming resources at an unsustainable rate, that we will be able to maintain our current consumerist lifestyle indefinitely but guilt-free, should be questioned. The most extreme of tech cults center on artificial intelligence, AI. In a recent article, philosopher and historian Emil P. Torres introduced his reader to Schoelles, an acronym denoting a set of secular cults: transhumanism, extropianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism, TESCREAL, all widely shared within the AI development community. Torres's description of Schoelles is so clearly relevant to the discussion of contemporary secular cults that it deserves to be quoted at length. Essentially, a bunch of 20th century atheists concluded that their lives lacked the meaning, purpose, and hope provided by traditional religion. In response to this realization, they invented a new secular religion in which heaven is something we create ourselves in this world. The new religion offered the promise of eternal life, just like Christianity, and has its own version of resurrection. Those who don't become immortal can have their bodies cryogenized by a company named Alcor, based in California, so they can be revived when the technological know-how becomes available. As for God, if he doesn't exist, then why not just create him? This is what AGI, artificial general intelligence, is supposed to be: an all-knowing, all-powerful entity capable of solving all of our problems and creating utopia. Indeed, the phrase godlike AI has been a popular way of referring to AGI over the past few months. For an entertaining dive into the cult of Schoelles, check out my colleague's Crazy Town podcast episode on William McCaskill, one of its gurus. As AI threatens to drive economic inequality to unprecedented levels, social upheaval is an easy, predictable consequence. In that case, even more people will abandon faith in mainstream institutions and explanations and grasp at cultic alternatives. Simultaneously, AI will make truth even harder to determine by flooding every communications medium with thoroughly convincing fake images, video, audio, and text. Everyone will be frantically looking for villains and heroes, and AI will deftly supply them. Living cult-free. Perhaps the most emotionally satisfying ending for this essay would be a forecast that society is evolving toward perfect rationality and that cultic thinking will disappear as we approach this inevitable utopia. However, the yearning for utopia is actually a feature of the cultic mindset. Modern post-Enlightenment democracies, with the benefit of science and its iterative method of getting ever closer to the truth, perhaps come closest to the unachievable ideal of a perfectly logic-driven society. But these are nations currently undermining their own rational futures through increasing economic inequality, climate change, overconsumption, and the development of AI. We humans are probably genetically wired for cult think. Nevertheless, some societies appear more rational than others, and some waver back and forth over time from a majoritarian adherence to facts to a contentious spinning off of cults and misguided notions. If we want to move forward toward the former condition, it may best be to start by acknowledging that we humans are cognitively complex creatures. We have perfectly good reasons for being attracted to cults and popular fallacies. They give us a sense of security, clarity, and community, but they lead us into error, sometimes fatally so. Building on that acknowledgement, we must get into the habit of examining our own beliefs while paying attention to changing conditions and new information. In other words, we must identify our blind spots and fill them with accurate knowledge, not seductive delusions. And we must do this while avoiding the tendency to accept evidence only if it confirms our beliefs. Most people are familiar with the phrases critical thinking and scientific method, but many misunderstand them to mean simply basing one's views on evidence according to our biases. And given today's blizzard of media sources and increasingly powerful internet algorithms that feed us news and advertising based on our previous searches, there's no lack of information to confirm any bias we have. Science and critical thinking just don't mean gathering evidence. They mean deliberately looking for evidence that disconfirms our existing beliefs or hypotheses, then changing our beliefs when they're contradicted by credible facts. In the end, the uncertainty remains. We can't answer every question through rational analysis because we don't have perfect information. And some subjects, by their very nature, will always have to be approached through values rather than reason. What's a good life? What should our daily priorities consist of? How much of our income should we donate to charity? We can apply critical thinking skills to such questions, but still come away with differing answers. For a few years after Janet and I left our cult, we met frequently with other ex-members so that we could compare notes about our experiences. We benefited enormously from this community of mutual support. I also read books on cults and critical thinking and consulted experts. Still, over time, I observed that some other ex-members of our group went on to seek out different cults or continued to think in cultic ways. And I still frequently catch myself looking for evidence to confirm already formed conclusions that I share with an in-group. Cultic thinking is habit forming because it fills human needs for meaning and belonging. It takes effort to break the habit. As old societal norms break down, there will be ever greater temptation to gravitate toward comforting tribal narratives. Resisting doing so can be a lonely experience if we drift apart from friends, relatives, and neighbors who join new in-groups that we chose to avoid. On the other hand, if we make the effort to align ourselves with reason and reality, we can serve as a bulwark for others in our community. Living cult-free is much easier if we support one another in thinking critically. Reducing our cult think means living with ambiguity during tumultuous times, but it's worth the effort if we put a high value on truth. All right. Well, there was Richard Heinberg on cults, and I thought it was more interesting to make a video instead of just listening to me read it without some graphics and some visuals. And it looked like you guys were enjoying in the chat, keeping busy. So, what I want to do next is talk a little bit about, let's see here, let me set this up. Okay, I think the organization that Richard was in was Emissaries of Divine Light. He was not in Esselen, and we'll get to talk about Esselen in a minute because Esselen's fascinating, and anything can be a cult. The Grateful Dead could be called a cult. People follow them. They still follow them. And Jerry died in 1995. And they just had their last shows. I mean, you know, it's a wide variety of choices you have. But this, I believe, may have been, and you know, he said he didn't want to talk about it, but hey, you know, 7 foundational truths of the human experience. And a lot of them sound alike. That's what I've noticed. They have their truths. You become what you love. In all things, give thanks. Wisdom is the active knowing of the one who knows. What the world needs most from you is for you to be a sun. You know what you express. Let love radiate without concern for results. You are divine. Okay, so that's the emissaries of divine light, and he's probably right. That we didn't, not many of us heard of it, but and then um, what I want to go to next is Scientology. We all know about Scientology. And right now, there's still a lot of, well, very wealthy people to take those courses. It's, very expensive. And Scientology certainly has its problems. Leah Remini is actually suing them right now, and she's going to call what's his name to be to be a witness. Um, yes, Connor. Jerry Garcia was wildly. Where is that? Wildly. I love Jerry Garcia. Yeah, a prophet. I loved him. When he died, I sat and cried my eyes out, but because I was a deadhead. I was a deadhead. Uh, okay, so Scientology, man is an immortal spiritual being. His experience extends well beyond a single lifetime. His capabilities are unlimited, even if not presently realized, as long as you have the right amount of money. Okay, so let's go to this, and then I'm going to talk about Esselen because Esselen is pretty cool. 10 notorious American cults. Where are they now? Now, this was from March, and I think these will all resonate with us. Okay. So, of course, the big one that most people hear about, most people know about, is the Manson family. And of course, I'm not going to show every video here, but we all know who he was. He was the most well known American cult leader in the 1960s, and he had his Manson family of people that wanted to follow him, and they did. They did. They did to murder and kill and maim, and it was pretty horrible. And I have a quick story. There was a guy that was in the Manson cult. I forget what his name was. I think it was Steve. And somehow, way back, my girlfriend Sue, who was always looking for something, always looking to belong, kind of got to be pen pals with him somehow or got messed up. But I mean, literally, nobody understood it. He was one of the ones that participated in these murders. And I think she was writing to him in prison for what I don't know. Sue was a very interesting friend of mine. And unfortunately, after she traveled the world, and she went to nursing school. She lived off grid. And then she went and she worked in Sudan as a nurse, and then she met some guy and traveled, all over and ended up in Sweden. But unfortunately, my friend, who was a bit on the nutty side, she took her life in, I think it was 2007. It was horrible, and it hasn't stopped. It's made my daughter feel terrible to this day. It's just because she called her Aunt Susu. But Sue could have joined a cult. I could have seen her, maybe not the Manson cult. Obviously, she was too young and she was writing to him. But this is what happens. People get sucked into these things easy, depending on who they are. And Richard's giving you a warning in that. So number 2, Warren Jeffs Fundamental Church. He founded the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. And they're awful. They really are. It had the roots in the Mormon faith. It had one noticeably different belief from its mother religion. The group practiced polygamy. So people are still after them. They still make TV shows about them. There's a lot of interest still in the Church of Latter-day Saints because I think they are still going. And the next, Rajneesh. This guy actually did have some interaction at Esselen, but this movement, it was pretty seriously messed up. This guy, here, I need to take a quick sip. This cult, well, they were in Oregon, Big Muddy Ranch. They turned into, it was big, 7,000 people that were there. And like a lot of them, this one collapsed. And he's dead, but I guess there's still some people that follow him. Number 4 is Angel's Landing. Now, this one is, I don't know that much about this one. This was in Wichita, Kansas. Lou Castro created a cult compound. He had convinced a small group of followers that he was a 1,000-year-old angel who could see into the future, tell people exactly when they would die, and to stay alive would need to have sex with young girls. So, I won't say what it sounds like. The group enjoyed an oddly extravagant lifestyle, and despite having no income, there was no paper trail of this guy existing before Angel's Landing, so they investigated him. When Patricia Hughes died in 2003, followed by her husband, at first there were accidents, they thought, but then there were life insurance policies. So, there were residents were dying like every couple of years. So this guy, it was a horrible one. Sexual abuse, and he was charged with 28 felonies, and he's in prison. But people followed him, and they had to know that he took insurance policies out on their life. Okay. Children of God. This was David Brandt Berg, and this was in 68 in California. And this one had communes all around the country and worldwide. And he would talk to his followers through letters, writing over 3,000 in 2 years. He would encourage female members to recruit new members by showing God's love and mercy. And it became known as flirty fishing. So a lot of these have a sexual component, an abusive component. I don't like it. And this, according to this article, it still continues. Maybe. I think this is an older one. And then there's the local to me in Albany, New York. I knew about this guy, Keith Rainier, NXIVM. And he, this is the one. Yep. The sex cult in Albany. Isn't that something? And I don't know. He's in jail, right? And again, sex trafficking. I actually knew someone from Albany area because I worked in Buffalo, but we had our central office was in Albany, who was involved in this. And with, it was all about learning and of course, self-help. But, 2020, and you probably all saw the show, he came forward and the women came forward with the psychological and sex abuse claims. So he shit the bed and he's in prison. Then this one. This was horrible. Jim Jones, the People's Temple. And that's where the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid" came from in Guyana. He said that there were, the People's Temple was the murders. Oh, they murdered that guy. This is the one where they drank the Kool-Aid, isn't it? Or was it the Branch Davidians? Now I'm getting mixed up. So that was him. Maybe it was these guys. This was the Branch Davidian. This was the Seventh-day Adventist. And while some regard the organization as a cult, they viewed themselves as a continuation of this guy's General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. They gained notoriety when, this is the shootout in Waco, right? Why am I getting these mixed up? The shootout in Waco. So it was, a cult or an overzealous religious sect. You decide. Heaven's Gate, this guy. Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite founded Heaven's Gate in 1974 after meeting 2 years prior and deeming themselves witnesses of revelation. Their teachings amassed several hundred followers by the 70s. The group's central belief was that they could reject their human nature and ascend to heaven as mortal extraterrestrial beings. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. Well, they ended because of suicides, copycat suicides. I wonder if they're up at Heaven's Gate. Buddha Field. And this was, a guy named Will Allen, Holy Hell documentary. This one was the 1980s in Hollywood, and it is widely referred to as a cult by former members who were lured in through yoga studios. Isn't that nice? Yoga studios. Founded by Jamie Gomez, who believes himself to be God. Yeah, they're all very godlike, aren't they? And so this guy abused many of the men. Oh my God. He pushed members to remain celibate while engaging in sexual relations with others, and he manipulated women into having plastic surgery and abortions for religious reasons. So that was pretty interesting. Just a quick go over. But I really want to talk about Esselen a little bit. And I'm going to let this play while I talk about Esselen, and we can just watch this video. Esselen in Big Sur, California. And there was a book by Jeffrey Kripal, and it was America and the Religion of No Religion, really. And he called it a utopian experiment creatively suspended between the revelations of the religions and the democratic, pluralistic, and scientific revolutions of modernity. And they had everyone. So I don't know if it's a cult or it's new age, but there's people that will say anything. Yeah, void thinking is a cult. Right. It got me started on all this, Richard's article. So it was founded in 1962 by Michael Murphy and Richard Price. They were two Stanford grads, and they were inspired by the ideas of Abraham Maslow and writer Aldous Huxley. So people will go, and it's still there. It's still there. It's changed, but they still have all kinds of courses. It's very expensive. Fritz Perls, the co-founder of Gestalt therapy, he made his name teaching workshops, as so many other people did. B.F. Skinner, Carlos Castaneda, he went there. Chemist Linus Pauling led seminars. Joan Baez was involved. The Beatles made an appearance. Hunter Thompson worked as a gatekeeper there. Everybody who was everybody back then. Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, Timothy Leary, Alan Watts, physicist Fritz Capra, they were involved with Esselen, and it was to be a really to learn a lot. Now it's the human potential, and it was like the mecca. I have my notes, I'm looking at them, of the New Age movement, freewheeling center of social outlaws who experimented with LSD, Eastern meditation, and in-your-face encounter groups, which was like the Gestalt type therapy, to expand themselves. And it's the human potential movement. And the human potential movement was very, it's very, self-centered, self-movement, not how it's with the group good, what's good for the group. It was really yourself. And they still have lots of programs. They've gone through a lot. Their original founder, was killed in an accident. He was in a hiking accident. It was really sad. Now they say it's more of a place that a lot of Silicon Valley goes to, and these courses are very expensive. They are really expensive, like $3,000 for a couple of days. But they have a lot of workshops, and now they do yogas and they have a lot of people. There's wait lists, the stages of tranquility. Now, I would not necessarily call this a cult. I just would say, you know, I think it was the beginning of something, Esselen, and that it's still there. And it's an absolutely gorgeous property. But they still are giving things. Let's see. Let's see if they have any prices here. Shauna Shapiro. They've got to. Oh, here. How much is this one? Does it have it? Tuition. Oh, register now. Okay, let's see. Does it have tuition? Oh, why isn't this one showing the tuition here? Is it? Oh, here it is. 1350 for this one. Oh, okay, to 8,450. So really, to go to Esselen now, you've got to be wealthy. In fact, somebody, this was really funny. Somebody wrote, and I'm going to find it on my notes. They spray painted the front, jive shit for rich white folk. So that is my story about these little cults. You know, they're not little cults. They're very they can be very damaging. I think Esselen was the beginning, and so many went so many different ways. I'm telling you, even motorcycle clubs can be considered a cult. And I know about that from my young life. There was a boss, a leader, everybody followed. They did what he said, what they said. They had a hierarchy. The women that were involved, it was also a lot of, in those days, I'm not going to say the name of the club, but in those days, there was a lot of sexual abuse, and there was a lot of the girls, expendable females. I mean, those kind of clubs had the earmarkings of a cult. So now to go full circle, guys. Are we a cult? Do we call ourselves doomers? I always complain. I say doomer adjacent, or I don't always like, the titles. Are we a cult? Well, I'm going to get some, I'm going to get some comments up here so that I have to just move things around a little bit. All right, guys, let's do some comments and see what you are talking about, because I wanted this to be interactive. Jean, let's see. Hi, Jean. Let me go down, and I had a couple saved. Bila, yeah, you're pretty funny. I identify as a conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are I told you so. He's good. That's pretty funny. I like it. And yes, I have to say about Connor, yes, you are 100% right. Yep. Yes. And Jean, about the migrants, I don't know. I guess that's more research, I don't know. That's Richard wrote that. So being that that's Richard's and not my words, I just wanted to make it a little less boring. Really deep hippie stuff. Oh yeah, well, I mean, back then, everyone went there. Unreal, Esselen. Unreal. Right. I didn't necessarily say cult, but I had the graphics, so, I thought it was interesting. Hi, I would never say I'm not in a cult, because that's what people in a cult say, right? Okay. So are we doomer cultists? Are we climate change cultists, ecocide cultists? How about we're just human beings that worry, that know more than a lot of people? I would say. The Church of the Holy Coffee Cup. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Realist. Yeah. Although realist has been taken over a little bit by the Esselen Institute, and James Doomer cult. I don't think so. Cult of Doom. Are we having fun yet? Come on, guys. Oh, wait. Donald's coming up with all of them. Donald, the Metal Church. And I know you can sit in full lotus. I don't call you in a cult. Qigong is not a cult. I don't think at all. I think it's a practice. And I think it's pretty neat. I think it's awesome. So, well, Lisa, I guess don't vote Republican if you don't want a fascist government. I will tell you guys one thing. I've been listening to David Feldman's analysis of things going on. I think he's pretty damn good. He says we have to get rid of Trump first to be able to get rid of Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, and the elitists. Interesting guy. Interesting guy. All right, guys. Hi, Steph. Seeing as cult comes from culture, if we to advocate for and actually change our culture to value nature first, would that be a cult? Well, if it was, it would be a beautiful one, wouldn't it? And there are a lot of societies that still do. That actually still do. Yeah, he does get it. He gets it. I agree. I think David Feldman gets it. And boy, he really analyzes what's going on. I can't stand a lot of the political stuff anymore, but I found this guy. I actually used him in one of my videos. If you had seen the quick little video I made, and I had he was talking about the fires, and he had showed a clip of the idiot from Fox who was saying it was fine to breathe all of that and that it was just natural because it was, just fires. Yeah. Well, guys, it's been an hour, and that's all I'm going. What do you mean you can barely sit in full lotus? Well, I can't sit in any of it anymore. Let's see. I think the U.S. is past being able to be one country. There are too many new realities. A breakup is coming. Perhaps. Am I your beloved, charismatic, and self-appointed leader? No. I'm not anybody's leader. Listen, ask my daughter. Just even the cats, Yes, I do agree. Getting rid of the Nazi state strikes me as an all-hands-on-deck scenario. It is, and we really need to get rid of it. And, yes, WASF. We've made the climate unlivable in many places. We are destroying the planet exponentially. The Antarctic is melting. Is warm. Alaska, people's houses are just sliding because of glacier melt. There's just so many problems. But we could always join a cult and just believe that somehow we're not going to be part of it. We're not. We're going to make it out. Okay, guys. Thank you for coming. And I didn't have my guest tonight. We're going to record it, and that will be Margaret Klein Solomon at the end of August. I've had so many problems. Yeah. Oh, Andrea. Yes, Andrea. Mwah, Andrea. I love Andrea. Absolutely. So thank you for coming, everybody. Love and peace. Yes. Thank you so much, guys. I really do appreciate all of you. And I'll see you with Jennifer on Friday. Peace out. Thank you so much for coming. And you know what? I love you. And that is what remains.